On behalf of the Charles E. Schmidt College of Science and Dean Valerie Forbes, I want to welcome you here to Frontiers of Science. I'm Rindy Anderson. I'm an associate professor of the biological sciences here at FAU, and it is my extreme pleasure to welcome Dr. Joseph Uscinski to talk to us tonight. He is a professor of political science at the University of Miami. He received his bachelor's degree from Plymouth State University, his master's from the University of New Hampshire, and his doctorate from the University of Arizona. His research has appeared in many of political science's top journals. His first book, The People's News, Media, Politics, and the Demands of Capitalism on New York University Press, addresses how audience demands drive news content. And his second book, American Conspiracy Theories, which we'll hear about tonight, on Oxford University Press, which he co-authored with Joseph Parent, examines why people believe in conspiracy theories. He'll tell us more about that tonight. I want to remind the audience that we'll have a question and answer period at the end of the talk, so do please stay and ask your questions. And now please help me welcome Dr. Uscinski to Florida Atlantic University.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My mother told me that there are two things not to talk about. The first was politics, and I'm a professor of political science, so that went out the window. The other one was religion, and I would add a third to that list, and that's conspiracy theories. So I'm in pretty big trouble. No matter where I give a talk, there are people that get upset. Don't. I'm not interested in telling you what's true or what's false. We all have conspiracy theories that we believe in, and that sort of binds us together, even though we all believe in different conspiracy theories. But there is something very unique about conspiracy theories that gets people upset. And if you don't believe me, at your next Thanksgiving or other family gathering, bring up a few conspiracy theories and see what happens. So I did this at the last Thanksgiving I was invited to, and that was 8 years ago. So I have to thank the sponsors before I get on with the talk. So most of the data I'll be talking about tonight was funded by the University of Miami, and my research is now funded by the NSF and the NIH. So we've heard a lot about this topic lately. It seems like everyone's talking about conspiracy theories, and they seem to be everywhere. Certainly recent events have been very much intertwined with conspiracy theories, whether it was the election of Donald Trump or the election of Joe Biden or the events of January 6th or things having to do with the coronavirus or even things outside of our country, like with Brexit. And if you've been paying attention to the news, you'll see that there's been a lot of news coverage of the topic lately. So when I first started studying conspiracy theories around 15 years ago, there was very little interest in the topic. I mean, of course they existed, but most news outlets weren't covering it as a topic unto itself. So if I went back and looked at the New York Times, said how many articles have they been publishing with the word conspiracy theory in it? And in 2010, it was just over 100 articles. By 2020, it was close to 800 articles. And I will say that I'm just a professor. I'm not a famous person. I take calls from journalists. Just in the year 2020 alone, I took 300 calls from journalists in that 1 year. Of course, it's good. I didn't have to commute anywhere, so I had plenty of time on my hands to do it. But that is an abnormal amount of attention to be put on the subject. So with all this coverage, what is it that the media is saying about conspiracy theories? What are they reporting? Well, typical reporting looks like this. The AP says that trust is waning, conspiracy theories are on the rise. The Economist says conspiracy theories are surging from the Congo to the Capitol. And Politico says you are living in the golden age of conspiracy theories. It doesn't sound good. That sounds bad. And of course, they want to know, will you fall into the conspiracy theory rabbit hole? That's a good question. And this is the Washington Post, by the way, not Cosmo, but nonetheless, you can take the quiz and find out if you are a conspiracy theorist. So what are the reported consequences of these conspiracy theories according to the media that we've been paying attention to? Well, they're driving people to not wear masks, to not get vaccinated. They're getting people to engage in very bad behaviors like kidnapping kids. Here's a Michigan man who killed his own wife after he went down a rabbit hole. And then you had a California dad who killed his kids because he thought that they were lizard people. So much of what we're hearing about tied into conspiracy theories are generally very bad and often very extreme outcomes. And who are the villains in all of this storytelling? Well, TikTok is spreading conspiracy theories. YouTube has unleashed a conspiracy theory boom. Social media is spreading the pandemic video everywhere. Social media companies are boosting election fraud claims. And the internet is in general just loosening our grip on reality. So I think we know who's bad here. It must be social media and the internet who's turning us all into conspiracy theorists. And when I said, who's the villain in all of this, I actually meant it quite literally. And this is reporting from The Guardian. Mark Zuckerberg, the modern Bond villain, is now coming for your children. If he catches them early, he'll have them for life. I doubt that that's really true given the way that there are no young people on Facebook anymore, but it sounds scary. And the reporting does sometimes go off the deep end. So here's NBC. Facebook, Google, and other internet platforms are creating a dystopian nightmare. We have to wake up from it. We thought these platforms were benign, but if we want to preserve our agency over our lives, we must act now. Well, that's pretty scary stuff. And even our government is echoing this sentiment that we see in the news media. They're killing people, Biden said of social media companies. The public is convinced of this narrative. So when we ask Americans in surveys, 70% of Americans think that conspiracy theories are currently out of control. 60% of Americans think that we believe them more now than we did 25 years ago. And the vast majority of Americans blame social media for this state of affairs. Now, there is, of course, good reason for concern. I mean, conspiracy theories aren't always true. Oftentimes they're not true. Oftentimes they're based on very dubious ideas. Sometimes they scapegoat vulnerable groups, and they express an extreme distrust of our institutions. They are associated with non-normative and sometimes dangerous behaviors. And sometimes governments may act on conspiracy theories, wanting to go after whoever it is that's behind it, whether that conspiracy actually exists or not. But before we take action, we have to understand that there are serious policy implications to doing anything about conspiracy theories. So when you start regulating technology like social media or the internet, you are inherently going to wind up with a decrease in innovation. If you start regulating online markets, you're going to have decreased choice and essentially increased prices. And what may likely wind up happening is that instead of going after the monopolies or the so-called monopolies online, government may very well wind up creating monopolies online. When Zuckerberg was pulled in front of the Senate to talk about what's going on with Facebook, Senator Lindsey Graham asked him, will you be willing to help us write the legislation to regulate social media platforms? Of course, Zuckerberg said, yeah, we'd be happy to. And only a year later, he showed up with the bill written in his hand to give to the Senate. So, of course, any such bill would favor Facebook against any other competitors. But most importantly, I think, if we start thinking about what do we do about conspiracy theories, we are regulating speech. And of course, if we start saying we got to take conspiracy theories down off the internet, that could chill speech because people may not know what counts and what doesn't. There will be collateral damage. Already, we have seen instances where people who do what I do, just study conspiracy theories rather than advocate for them, have their videos taken down off of YouTube and other platforms just because we're talking about them. And it can lead to censorship. If you allow government to decide what's a conspiracy theory and what's not, what you will find is that conspiracy theories will always be things that accuse whoever is in power at the time. So why do people believe conspiracy theories? Well, the simple answer is for lots of reasons, and the same reasons that people believe anything else. In the last few years, people have been asking, why do people buy into these ideas, even though they don't have a lot of evidence, and they're accusing people of doing all sorts of things. Some of these ideas are bizarre. Why do people believe them? As if there's some magic reason. And what I typically say to people is, people have all sorts of bizarre beliefs that aren't particularly well evidenced. And for most people, belief comes first and evidence will come second, if at all. So there isn't really anything special here. In short, people like to believe things that match what they already believe about the world. People like to believe things that tell them that it's good to be who they are and that the people they're competing against, they're the bad people. So this is very much just a combination of largely stable factors. So our predispositions, the things we believe about the world, our personal biases, how likely we are to think that things are just controlled by conspiracies at all, what groups we belong to, what political party, what racial groups, what religious groups. These are very important because people rarely like to point fingers at their own group. It's always the other group that's conspiring against us because we're always the victim. And our personality traits often drive what we're willing to accept and what ideas we're willing to reject. On top of these things that are within us, there's also a variety of environmental factors. Who thinks that elections are rigged? Rarely the winner. It's always the loser. In politics as in sports, right? The losing team always thinks the referees or the umpires had it in for them. To the winners, everything was hunky-dory. There's nothing to complain about. The relative distribution of power in a society drives who believes conspiracy theories. If you're at the top, if you're in control, there's no reason to think anyone's out to get you. But if you're at the bottom of a power asymmetry, then you have to be vigilant and vigorous in what you think is going on because there are dangers out there. So oftentimes what we see is people in the out party thinking that the in party is conspiring against them. And at the same time, when our political leaders, our political elites and our media elites are trafficking in conspiracy theories, we will find that those cues can reach their audiences and convince people of things such as conspiracy theories. So a very simple model to think about is simply that any specific belief we have, so take a belief in any conspiracy theory, is the product of two things: information coming in and our group attachments, our predispositions, and our personality traits to interpret that information. And the combination of those things together then lead to that specific belief. So you can imagine two people with a different set of dispositions and group attachments. If given the same exact information, they will come to completely opposite conclusions just because of who they are. So information doesn't always lead people to the same thing. Often it depends on what they already believe about the world. And more importantly, these attachments, dispositions, and personality traits also dictate what information we access in the first place. So oftentimes liberals aren't watching Fox and conservatives aren't watching MSNBC. People are picking and choosing their information sources, often because those sources tell them what they already believe about the world. It feels good to be told what you already believe about the world. Everything seems right. But do an experiment on yourself tonight. Go home and watch the other channel and see how it makes you feel. You may want to claw your eyes out after a few minutes. So the popular narrative is something like this. In recent years, social media use is driving to increases in conspiracy theory beliefs, and this is in turn leading to increases in non-normative behaviors like not getting vaccinated, not wearing masks, committing violence, et cetera, et cetera. So if that was true, what we would expect over time is that any conspiracy theory that we poll on should be going up in beliefs. So if we poll on a conspiracy theory a few times over time, we'll find that at each time point, it should be believed by more people than at the previous time point, right? And this should most certainly be the case, given that conspiracy theories are very much ubiquitous on social media and lots of people are on social media. So these ideas should just be spreading and people should be adopting them. We should be able to tell if that's the case. So let me just start by looking at three critical cases. I'll start with Kennedy conspiracy theories, because those give us a 60-year time span. Then I'll move on to COVID and then to QAnon. So only a few weeks after JFK was assassinated in 1963, Gallup did a poll, and they found that 50% of Americans believed that Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy rather than by a lone gunman. That's 50. By 1975, it was up to 80%. So the vast majority of Americans believed this was the case. But only in the internet era has belief come down. So now it's back to around where it started 60 years prior, around 55% more recently. So what does this tell us? On the one hand, you don't need social media for people to believe conspiracy theories. Two, people believe conspiracy theories long before social media. And three, it's not necessarily the case that social media and the internet are driving all conspiracy theory beliefs up. I mean, certainly here, it's just not the case. So let's look at COVID. And this was a case that numerous headlines were written about saying, oh my God, there's misinformation and conspiracy theories everywhere, and this is a real problem, and everyone is believing them. We're in an infodemic. So was that the case? So right in the middle of March, my team and I happened to have a survey about to go out. So we threw two items on. One asking Americans if they thought that COVID was being exaggerated for political purposes to hurt Trump in the election year. And the other one asking if COVID was a bioweapon, purposely engineered and spread to kill us or harm us. We then followed these up over time. So what we found in March 2020 was we had about 30% believing each. But then we followed up again in June of 2020, October of 2020, and for the bioweapon question in May of 2021. And what we found through repeated polling was that there were no increases. These beliefs were stable over time. And you can imagine, like, as a social scientist, I think about, what could I do in an experiment to get people to believe or not believe a conspiracy theory? And COVID would be that thing if I was to experiment on the world. It's sort of like cranking every knob up to 11. We're going to have a deadly pandemic. We're going to have a lockdown. And guess what? You're going to spend all your time on the internet and social media, and you're going to be freaking out because your health and livelihood are going to be at risk. There's going to be an economic crash. Every reason we think could drive people to buy into conspiracy theories. And these should have been shooting these beliefs through the roof. But their initial levels were middling at best, and they never went up over time. In June 2020, we started polling on some of the other ideas that had become prevalent. So whether the government was going to force a vaccine on Americans, whether Bill Gates was behind the pandemic, whether we would get tracking devices in our necks from the vaccine, whether hydroxychloroquine could prevent or cure your COVID, whether 5G spread COVID viruses, and whether you should spray yourself with disinfectant to cure your COVID. What we found when we followed up a year later with all of these ideas was that they either stayed the same or went down over time. So again, no increases over time. So moving on to QAnon, for those of you who might not be familiar with QAnon, this is a conspiracy movement that started in late 2017 on an anonymous internet chat board with somebody claiming to be a government insider working at the Department of Energy with Trump to battle the deep state. And the deep state happened to be comprised of satanic sex traffickers and baby eaters. And that this anonymous poster was giving clues, coded clues on this anonymous chat room to the followers so they could follow along and know what was going to happen next in politics. Now, it was said throughout 2020 and 2021 that this group was big and getting bigger and essentially taking over the world. And at the same time, there was a lot of reporting on the bad behavior exhibited by some members of the group. And this person I'm showing you here is from January 6th. That's the QAnon shaman who entered the Capitol building with furs and horns. So we started polling this in Florida in summer of 2018, so early on in the existence of this group. And what we did was we put it on a Florida-wide survey, and we gave people what's called a feeling thermometer. So on a scale from 0 to 100, people could rate how much they liked the QAnon movement, with 0 meaning they really hate it, and 100 meaning they really, really like it. The average rating from Floridians in 2018 was a 24 out of 100. So no stunning endorsement from Florida. But interestingly, even at the time, journalists kept reporting this group is big and getting bigger. Now, just as a comparison case, I also put Fidel Castro on that same poll. And obviously you're from Florida, you know we don't like Castro that much. We danced in the streets in front of the Versailles restaurant in Miami when he passed. We put him on there too. He came in only 2 points away from QAnon. So even though the media was saying this is really popular and taking over, it was about as popular as Fidel Castro. We followed that poll up in 2019, 2020, 2021. And again, we found no increases over time. People, as they started to learn more about the group, actually started to like it less and less over time. If we just ask a straight up question, are you a believer in QAnon or not? In 2019, nationwide, we got 5%. And interestingly, if you divide the sample into Republicans and Democrats, it was 6% of Democrats and 6% of Republicans believing it at the time. So oftentimes QAnon is called a far-right conspiracy theory. But in terms of who believes it, that's not really the case. What seems to be driving belief in this isn't so much republicanism or conservatism as we normally think of it. It's much more about hating the political establishment as a whole. So much so that you think they're killing and eating babies. We followed that poll up again in 2021, and again, there was no change in how much Americans liked QAnon. And just to put those numbers in perspective, the yellow bar there is belief in JFK conspiracy theories, which was 11 times higher than belief in QAnon at that time. So it sort of puts in perspective. Everyone was afraid of this thing big and getting bigger, but it certainly wasn't even close. Now, one thing I'm going to come back to in a little bit is that one thing QAnon did was it adopted a lot of ideas that pre-existed QAnon, ideas that had already been around for a long, long time. Ideas about widespread government and Hollywood sex trafficking, ideas about there being a deep state. And those ideas, if you just poll on them, you'll find a lot more people believing in those ideas. But many of those people don't know what QAnon is and probably bought into those ideas long before QAnon showed up. So beyond those critical cases, we went back to the Roper Public Opinion Database. We found all the survey questions that had been asked in previous decades, asking Americans about their beliefs in specific conspiracy theories. Then in 2021, we re-polled all of those theories just to see had they gone up or down over time. And this led us to have 37 conspiracy theories, which we could make over time comparisons with. 6 increased, and of the 6 that increased, none of them are the ones that journalists are typically talking about. So none of them had to do with COVID or QAnon. 16 had no change over time, and 15 had decreased. So the average change over time was -3 points. So instead of conspiracy theory beliefs going up over time, they're actually going down a little bit over time. But you might say, well, maybe it's not that beliefs in individual conspiracy theories are increasing over time. Maybe it's more the case that people are just more conspiracy minded. And maybe that's increasing over time. Well, for the last decade, we've been measuring just how conspiratorial are people in their thoughts generally. And we measure this on our surveys with a handful of items that sort of peek under the hood. So we're not asking about specific conspiracy theories, but more general worldviews that could lead people to conspiracy theories. So for example, the idea that much of our lives are being controlled by plots hatched in secret places. So we started measuring this in 2012, and we've been following it up for the last 11 years. And again, in national samples over and over again, we find no evidence of increases over time. So, returning to the popular narrative, social media use is driving increases in conspiracy theory beliefs, which is then driving increases in bad behaviors. Well, we're not finding evidence of that. So let's look at what else could be going on. So if you go back to that popular narrative, it's often framed as something like this. You have a bunch of very nice, normal, well-adjusted people, and they're hanging out, and then they go onto social media, and then all of a sudden, it turns them into bad people, and they start doing terrible things because they've adopted really bad beliefs. So let's put that to the test. So it's absolutely true that people who use more social media are also more likely to believe in conspiracy theories. That's largely undisputed. So when we do surveys and say, what social media platforms are you using, how much are you using them, and then we ask them, which of all these conspiracy theories do you believe? What we find is that the people using the most social media are believing the most conspiracy theories. However, correlation is not causation. And one thing that goes on with the internet, one thing that it's just entirely designed for, is for self-selection. People go to the internet and they're creating their own experience. They pick their own friends. I pick my own family members. Friends some and not others. Some are muted. So given that people can pick what they want, what we really tend to find once we dig a little bit deeper is that people who are already prone to conspiracy theories or people who already believe them outright are going to social media to find what they want because they can't get it in other places, right? If you're really interested in conspiracy theories, you're not going to watch the daily network broadcast news because it's not going to satisfy your craving for it. Instead, you can go to the internet and look up whatever websites you want. So it's important to understand that as much as we say there's conspiracy theories and misinformation all over the internet, that's not really the case. We have the world's library in our pocket, and it's tons of true and valuable information. If people are choosing to find conspiracy theories or other things, it's because they're seeking it out for the most part. And then even if somebody is incidentally exposed to a conspiracy theory, it doesn't mean they're automatically going to believe it, right? So what we need to do is sort of contextualize social media use with, one, the fact that these beliefs aren't increasing, even though there are conspiracy theories that are easy to access online. So now if we take this to the realm of non-normative behaviors, I opened up saying, there are lots of instances where people who believe conspiracy theories are acting very terribly on them. So is it the case that those beliefs are by themselves driving these bad behaviors? Well, first of all, behaviors are really hard to predict. And what we find in our surveys is that pretty much everyone believes one, if not a few, conspiracy theories. So if every conspiracy theory led somebody to commit violence, the streets would be running red with blood. People would be killing each other everywhere. And that's just not happening. These instances of conspiracy-driven violence and behavior make the news because they're the exception to the rule rather than the rule themselves. So even if we know someone's belief, that doesn't mean that they're going to act in any non-normative way, doesn't mean they're going to commit violence or do anything that anyone else wouldn't do. At the same time, people have long-standing personality traits and predispositions in place long before exposure or belief in any particular conspiracy theory. And oftentimes it's those dispositions and traits, perhaps in combination with a particular belief, that would lead them to act in a particular way. And that's very important in this case. If we're talking about antisocial behavior, what's important to know is that antisocial people behave in antisocial ways, and antisocial people often adopt antisocial beliefs. So it's not necessarily the case that the beliefs are driving the behavior, but it's their underlying personality traits, whatever those might be, that are driving them to adopt beliefs, to seek out information, and to act in particular ways. So I'll just give you a few recent examples and maybe contextualize them a little bit more. All four of these received a lot of media coverage when they happened. So early on in the pandemic, there was a woman in Arizona who went to a Target department store and trashed the mask aisle because she had gotten into the QAnon conspiracy theory. And it was reported QAnon is driving people to attack department stores. Well, if you dig a little bit deeper into the person's story, you find out that they had mental illness, which had been diagnosed but was not being treated at the time. She had lost her job, she was in financial trouble, and she was isolated due to the pandemic. Now, put all of those things together, and it's easy to understand why we're going to find some people acting out. So it's not just a belief, but all sorts of other factors that are involved. There was a man in California who, and this is a very terrible case, he killed his children with a spear gun because he began to believe that they had serpent DNA and were going to grow into lizard people. If you look into the person's history, that was just one of many, many beliefs that he had. He also thought that he was a character from the movie The Matrix. He was clearly delusional and probably had untreated mental illness. And even though the headlines right away said linked to conspiracy theories, what's probably going to wind up happening is the bigger link is going to be between this person and mental illness. He likely won't stand trial. The man pictured here killed the crime boss of the Gambino mafia family in New York. And people thought, oh, QAnon is now getting people just to go murder mafiosos, which seems very strange. As it turns out, he's not going to stand trial. He's just mentally ill. And interestingly, if you look at his behavior leading up to this, he believed that Donald Trump was talking to him, just to him individually through his car radio. And he thought that Trump was telling him to arrest the mayor of New York, which he tried to do, and they just sent him away. And then he wound up killing a mafioso. And then finally, to return to the guy with the horns and the furs who attacked the Capitol on January 6th, this is a person who didn't really have a lot of direction in life, didn't really have any clear political goals, had lots of strange beliefs, and he just sort of bounced from city to city, didn't really fit in with anything, and eventually just winds up storming the Capitol. When he leaves the Capitol, and somebody asked him, what did you accomplish today? He didn't really have much to say about it. He wasn't really driven by any political goal, by any particular belief. It's just, if you were to listen to him talk, you'd say, this person probably has some undiagnosed issues that they're dealing with, and that's precisely what his attorney said when he was on trial. So if we want to think about who's engaging in really bad behavior, it's probably people who are probably prone to bad behavior going online, and they're still the same people. So it would be really nice if we had that boogeyman to blame, because it's very scary to say sometimes people just do bad things. We live in a world where bad things happen, and it'd be nice if we could blame this exogenous force. It's the social media, it's Mark Zuckerberg, and they're brainwashing people, and they're making bad things happen. It's a nice fairy tale. It's also the same sort of thinking that conspiracy theorists do when they posit there's some powerful group out there who's controlling things, and if not for them, everything would be great. Well, we could get rid of social media tomorrow. It doesn't mean any of our problems are going to be solved. So why the disjuncture between what the social scientific evidence is showing and what the media continues to report? Well, so one thing to understand is social media companies are in competition with mainstream media news sources. And there's been a long history of different forms of news going after each other to make themselves look better, or perhaps to get the government to come down on their competitors. The New York Times really doesn't have that much love for Twitter or Facebook. Neither does the broadcast news, because this is what is really eaten into their power and profits over time. One thing I find with journalists too is that they often believe in hypodermic needle theories of influence. And this is the idea that people just believe something and all of a sudden they're immediately convinced, like we're all lemmings, just taking in information and updating our beliefs in intuitive ways immediately. That doesn't really happen, right? Many of our beliefs are stable and long-standing, and no matter what we're told, we don't change our minds very easily. And again, if that was the case, Thanksgiving would go so much better for all of us. But it's the fact that we don't like changing our mind, even in the face of argument or evidence. People like to stick with what they already believe. There's also been a long line of tech panics. There were tech panics around the printing press, novels, radio, television, cable TV. Everything was blamed for bringing about the end of society. All forms of media have been blamed for filling people's minds with misinformation and nonsense. This is just the latest one to get blamed. It's sort of funny, when I was a kid, everyone was saying, oh, don't let anyone watch TV. TV's bad for kids. You have to limit screen time on TV. And now you hear people say, I don't know why all these kids are on social media. They should just watch TV like I did when I was a kid. So even if you think about when the media is saying, oh, it's social media is driving these increases in conspiracy theory beliefs, their story is rarely straight. I mean, here it's 9/11 ushered in the new era of conspiracy theories. Or was it Sandy Hook that ushered in the new era of conspiracy theories? Or did they flourish after Parkland? Or did the pandemic give us the new golden age of conspiracy theories? I guess we're always getting a new golden age of conspiracy theories. And there's always a conspiracy theory panic, according to the media too. In 2018, this was a highly conspiratorial year, according to Vox. In 2017, the Daily Star said this is the year of conspiracy theories. In 2013, the New York Times said we're a conspiracy nation. 2011, conspiracy theories have never lodged this deeply in the American psyche. In 2010, it's now a period of fashionable conspiracism. 2004, it's the golden age of conspiracy theory. 1994, the Washington Post said this is the dawn of a new age of conspiracy theory. Of course, it was correcting itself, because only 3 years earlier it said we were then living in the age of conspiracy theory. 1977, we're as conspiratorial as the pan-Slav nationalists. I don't even know how we could know that. And in 1964, they have grown weed-like in this country and abroad. So it's always fashionable to engage in a conspiracy theory panic. It's always peaking. Of course, there's never any evidence for any of these claims. So what should we believe is a pretty good question. One, journalists are writing on deadlines. I mean, as an academic, I could write a paper and spend 15 years on it, and that's okay, because I'm tenured. Journalists don't have that luxury. They have deadlines tomorrow, right? So they can't wait forever for the best evidence, and sometimes they have to say what feels right. But what I would suggest is when you're going through news sources, whatever the claims are, think about, well, what evidence are they showing to back this up? So I want to leave you with some good and bad news. So the good news is things in terms of public opinion aren't necessarily getting worse. So that's the good news. The bad news is things were always this bad in terms of what people believe and how much. And importantly, there are some serious current dangers that we need to think about. And I'm going to point to two of them. And one is what I might call a sensationalized sex and Satan panic that's taking place. And the other one is what I would call the white replacement conspiracy theory. So there are some conspiracy theories that just on their own could be potentially motivating because of what they're arguing about. Now, in terms of the top one there, the idea is that teachers, Disney, satanic cults are grooming, molesting, murdering, killing, eating children. And the bottom one there is the idea that white people are being systematically exterminated because rich people, usually rich Jewish people, want to bring in cheap foreign labor to replace whites. So what we are finding with conspiracy theories such as this is that political leaders are often bringing these ideas up. They're feeding them to their constituents, to their fans out there, and they're essentially connecting what I would call toxic ideas with toxic people. So just to start with the white replacement theory, we've seen numerous instances where people have taken up arms and gone on mass shootings to push back against what they see as an extermination of the white race. So when we put these ideas onto national surveys, what we find is that there are quite a few people who agree with them. So the idea that powerful politicians and corporate leaders are replacing white people with cheaper foreign labor, 32% agree. If we ask the same thing about, is this going on in Europe, 27% agree. If we ask if white people are being discriminated against with immigration policy, we get 31% agreeing. When we analyze this data, what we find is that the people who are most likely to agree with these ideas also harbor a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment, racial resentment, and antisocial personality traits such as narcissism and psychopathy. They also tend to support Vladimir Putin, domestic extremist groups, and have a hankering for political violence. At least on surveys, they say things like, if violence is called for, I am ready. Really neat, they say that they really want to run for public office and they feel extremely qualified to do so. The interesting thing though, often this is called a far-right conspiracy theory, but once we start accounting for all of these different personality traits and other views that people have, it's not really republicanism or conservatism that's driving this so much. It's more just a dissatisfaction with the establishment as a whole and some bits of sort of racialized thought. The next case is what I would call the sensationalized satanic panic. And during 2022, there were lots and lots of pastors, politicians, and media personalities making claims, particularly targeting the LGBTQ plus community, saying that they're grooming children. Many of these accusations accuse Disney, gay people, trans people, public school teachers of being involved in some scheme to sexually harm children. I'll give you one quote, and there are many that she's made, but many by lots of other politicians. So here she is saying, the Democrats are the party of pedophiles, of princess predators from Disney, of teachers, elementary school teachers, trying to transition their elementary school age children and convince them they're a different gender. Their identity is the most disgusting, evil, horrible thing happening in our country. Sort of very Manichaean rhetoric, very good versus evil, and very accusatory. So when we poll on ideas like this nationwide, we again find that there are a lot of people who buy into them. So the idea that satanic cults are abusing thousands of children, 33%. The idea that government elites are engaged in sex trafficking, 30%. There's a secret gay agenda to convert young people into gay and trans lifestyles, 28%. There's a secret agenda in public schools to indoctrinate children into gay and trans lifestyles, 27%. Disney grooms children, 26%. Satanic ritual sex abuse is widespread, 25%, and numerous preschools and public schools secretly engage in satanic practices, 18%. So these are fringe only in the sense that they're sort of off the beaten path of mainstream thought, but they aren't fringe in terms of how many people believe them. Some of these ideas are fairly widespread. And again, like the belief right before this, these are again predicted by antisocial personality traits and antagonisms toward the political establishment as a whole. Very much people who buy into this stuff want to blow up the system. These are also, again, associated with non-normative tendencies and behavioral intentions. So the real dangers of this sort of stuff isn't just that people will believe it, but that you will get political and media elites engaging in this rhetoric, ginning people up, and acting on it either with the force of government or leading people in the mass public to act on it. So here we can see from 2021 through last summer that we saw a marked increase of anti-gay and trans protests, and also an increase in armed anti-gay and trans protests. And one way to think about this is that the political leaders who are engaging in this rhetoric are acting as the glue, connecting toxic people to toxic ideas, and then almost encouraging them to go and take non-normative actions. So with that, I wish I could leave you on a better note. But with that, thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Yeah. Parts of your presentation were quite comforting to me, but the one thing that I'm most concerned about is that a third of us have bought into these things. And is there, you kind of doing any questioning about people reversing their ideas?
Oh, if I knew that, I'd be a much richer man, I'm sure, because everyone would be having a lovely Thanksgiving. Is it easy to get people to change their minds about things they care about? No. And once someone has their heels dug in, there's almost nothing you could do. There's no fact check, no link, no website you could send them that's just going to change their mind about it. When I have seen people change their mind about things, it usually takes place over the longer term, over a series of conversations, and they have to be willing to change their mind. Well, maybe. Some get out and say, oh, no, I was framed. But, I mean, I don't want to start putting people in jail to have them change their minds about things.
What is your definition of conspiracy? What is your definition of theory? And what is your definition of conspiracy theories?
So I'll give you my definition of conspiracy theory, and that will probably answer all those questions for you. Okay. So conspiracy theory, I define as a small group of powerful people working in secret for their own benefit and against the common good, and in a way that undermines our bedrock ground rules against the widespread use of force and fraud. And further, this idea has not been adopted by the appropriate knowledge-generating bodies with open data and evidence to show that it indeed happened. right? So the difference between conspiracy, which is a real thing, and conspiracy theory, which is an alleged thing, is that we're not quite sure if it's true or not, because the people that would investigate such a thing either have yet to do so or have done so and haven't said that this is indeed the case. So if you were to say, to take an example like Watergate, I call Watergate a conspiracy because Richard Nixon and his associates did conspire to undermine the Constitution and to violate numerous laws in a way that undermined our bedrock ground rules. And on top of that, people made admissions in open court of the crimes they had committed, and there were investigations that supported that these things actually did happen.
There's another question over here.
You mentioned the 37 conspiracies, and you talked about most of them not rising in popularity, but you said 6 of them did increase. Can you share a couple of those?
So I'll show you the one that I think went up the most, and that's aliens. And this is the reason why. In the last 5 years, there's been a ton of government and media attention. Like the New York Times and Washington Post have done a lot of stories on alien. They call it UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. But there's been a ton of stories on it, and it's sort of taken off. Now, those beliefs have always been with us, and they've waxed and waned over time. But because of the amount of coverage it's gotten, particularly in the mainstream news, it's gone up a few points.
One of the things that my feeling is on a lot of this stuff is that laziness and conclusion jumping. And what I mean about that is that somebody sees the surface of something and you have all the information that if you want to do some research or you want to look into it, it's there, but they don't bother doing any research or looking into it. They only see the surface, or they don't want to go to any further because it's too much of an effort, and so that becomes what they believe in. How does that factor in?
So the unfortunate thing is that we all do this to some extent, right? And I'll give you a really good example. So there are people who think climate change isn't happening. And they say that's not happening at all. It's a hoax. It's a sham. And people like to say of those climate deniers, oh, well, they're not following the science. They're not paying attention to the science. They're anti-scientific. They don't want to look at the journals. They just want to believe what they want to believe. Well, you can say that about the people who believe in climate change too. I mean, most folks out there in the public didn't read the Journal of Climatology. They haven't checked out the data. They're not examining any of these things themselves. They're hearing it secondhand through the sources that they pick. So just as someone might be listening to their trusted sources, their news stations telling them, hey, climate change isn't real and you shouldn't care about it, other people are just getting the opposite from their trusted news stations and their trusted leaders. And neither's really digging that much deeper most of the time. It's just in this case, the people who say climate change is real happen to be in line with the prevalent science, and the people saying it's fake aren't.
I was wondering if you believe in any conspiracy theories and if you think that they're always a negative thing.
No, they're not always a negative thing. Conspiracy theories can do good things, right? We know a lot more about the Kennedy assassination than we did decades ago because of conspiracy theorists, because they kept pushing for more transparency, for more information. And 60 years after the fact, they still haven't released all the documents. And I'm glad that there are some conspiracy theorists continually saying release more documents. Now, even if all the documents are released, I don't think the conspiracy theorists are going to change their mind. Because on the one hand, they'll probably just say, well, they're still hiding something. But on the other hand, it's not what I tell Kennedy believers is, you know, it's not like the CIA has a vault with a document locked in it that says we did it, that they're just going to release at some point if they're forced to. So that might not be so good. But this is the same thing with 9/11. We know more about 9/11 because there were a lot of questions about what happened, and that pushed the 9/11 Truth Commission, right? So these can do a good thing. Even if they're wrong, they can push further questioning. And you could sort of think of it like an appeal on a court case, right? Pushing for more information and more hearings. And what was do I believe any? No, I did. When I grew up, I was really big into JFK, and that was because I was in high school when the Oliver Stone movie came out. But now I teach a course on conspiracy theories for the last decade, and I show that movie every semester. And now I've just started to realize how bad it is. And and the thing is, I watched the movie, I'm like, wow, this is all true. And then even the filmmaker said, most of this is not true. And it doesn't even make sense on its own once you see it over and over again. So.
Hi, how are you? So you delve and kind of cover all these conspiracy theories and quantify them, that kind of stuff. How deep do you kind of explore into any one of them to kind of understand its depths? And then how do you actually keep yourself from going cuckoo?
So some I'm really concerned about. So for example, when I see government officials engaging in certain sorts of conspiracy theories, I'll spend more time on those. I'll do a lot more polling on those, and I'll try to investigate who is most likely to believe those particular conspiracy theories. Because if some Joe on the street believes a conspiracy theory, the answer is so what, right? But what concerns me is when you have very powerful people, especially people who have access to the levers of government, believing these ideas and then potentially acting on them with authoritative force. So it's in those instances that I get more concerned and start spending more time looking at it. And what was the second part? Oh, I went cuckoo long ago.
I may have misunderstood one of your slides on QAnon. The second one you showed was about, I don't know, 6% of the country equally split politically. But an earlier one, there was 24%. I believe that was in Florida. And to what extent, well, since we need theories like this in very few special states like Florida to greatly affect our political course. To what extent is their targeting of where and how conspiracy theories are being used?
Okay, so to clarify the first thing about the QAnon slides, so the first slide was a feeling thermometer. So participants in the survey were asked to rate QAnon on a scale from 0 to 100, with 100 being they like it and 0 being they hate it. So the average rating that it received from our survey participants was a 21. So that's not 21% like it. It's just the average amount of like that our survey respondents had for it was 21. And then the second slide was just a straight up question, do you believe QAnon or not? And it was 6% saying yes. So if you put those two slides together, it doesn't have a great reputation in general. People don't really seem to like it and liked it less over time. And very few people just flat out say, yeah, I'm a believer. And what was the second part again? I forgot.
Well, basically, do you find conspiracy theory rates different in certain, in key states during election years?
That we don't know yet. I guess I study Florida because I'm from here, and we've done a lot of polling in Florida, and we've asked Floridians about their conspiracy theories, and we have no shortage. We've asked Floridians about their other strange beliefs. I think we had 17% thinking that Walt Disney's head was frozen underneath the theme parks. They say it's not true, but I'm always looking when I'm at Epcot. Whether they're targeting particular states with certain conspiracy theories could be true. They target politicians target states with all sorts of things because they know what resonates in different places. But looking nationwide, in recent years, politicians, many, and I could point to specific people that I'm sure you have in mind, but it's quite a few now, who are using conspiracy theories regularly as part of their mainstream rhetoric to build coalitions and win elections. And it's happening in a way that's a lot more obvious than it ever happened in the past. I mean, I can remember instances where national leaders used conspiracy theories in previous decades, only because they were the exception to the rule. Like Hillary Clinton said, my husband's troubles are the product of a vast right-wing conspiracy. Well, that sticks out because she wasn't always pumping out conspiracy theories. It was a very rare thing for her to say something like that. But in recent years, I mean, there's a conspiracy coming from somebody in Congress or the White House all the time. So it's just become part and parcel of elite rhetoric. I mean, the good news is that people aren't just wholesale believing all of it, because it's not necessarily convincing people, but politicians at least seem to think that it's motivating the people that they want to motivate to get out and donate and to turn out to vote.
Okay, okay. Let's end it there. You can please stay and ask Dr. Uscinski your additional questions, and please help me thank him for joining us today.
Thank you so much.